My name is Jennifer Aguinaldo. I am its Energy and Technology Editor. And so over the past 5 to 8 years, we've seen the increased adoption of PPP in the water desalination sector, in contrast to the 20 years before that, when water production was usually merged with power production. So the recent drive to decouple power and water production in line with the energy efficiency goals of most countries in the region have given rise to this new trend of independent water projects. While Oman pioneered the IWP projects when it awarded Gubra in 2013, it wasn't until 3 years ago with the Tawila IWP in Abu Dhabi and Rabah IWP in Saudi Arabia that we've seen a drastic decline in terms of the cost of water, or in terms of the levelized cost of water from these projects. The success of the IWP projects has also pushed the use of PPP as a procurement model in other sectors, subsectors of the water sector, mainly sewage, reservoir, and water transmission pipelines. I am joined this afternoon by a distinguished list of distinguished panelists, and I'll start introducing them. I'll start by introducing the advisor to His Excellency Minister of Water and Irrigation, Jordan, Jiries Dababneh. Welcome, Jiries. Our next panelist is the Chief Investment Officer of Rakiza in Oman, Qaisar Zaman. Our final panelist is Abdullah bin Tuwaym, of course, the Director for Transaction Management at Saudi Water Partnership Company in Saudi Arabia. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to encourage the audience to participate by sending your questions, and we will try to accommodate them towards the end of this panel. May I now give a few minutes to each panelist, starting with Abdullah bin Tuwaym to give us their opening remarks. Abdullah.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be in this discussion panel. I'm Abdullah bin Tuwaym, and I am the IWP Transaction Management Director at SWPC. At SWPC was established in 2003, and it is the principal off-taker from the private sector regarding PPP projects related to the water production, sewage water, strategic reserves, and the transmission pipelines. We're also responsible for the tendering of these projects. SWPC plays a central role in the private sector to provide high quality, low cost services, in addition to increasing the local content and using the latest technologies. At the transaction department, we manage the tendering of these projects from the initial stage to the financial close.
Thank you. Thanks, Abdullah. We'll now move over to Qaisar Zaman for a few words. Qaisar?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this conference. My name is Qaisar Mohammed Zaman. I am the CIO of an infrastructure fund called Rakiza, located in Oman. This is a new fund that has achieved its first closing last year, and we're still in fundraising mode, but we have raised around $500 million to date to invest in infrastructure projects within Oman and the MENA region. This fund has two co-fund managers. We have a UK infrastructure fund called Equitix that has a book of about $7 to $8 billion of infrastructure investments, actually 7 to 8 billion pounds worth of infrastructure investments across the UK and Europe. And we have OIN, which I am part of, which is a separate entity that's has the Oman Investment Authority as the owner. And essentially we look at the whole spectrum of infrastructure asset class core, and our investment horizon is about 10 years, and we look for businesses that have predicted and stable returns. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Qaisar. Very well said. Welcome, gentlemen, to this panel. probably start by asking Abdullah. Saudi Arabia has a huge pipeline of projects within the next 6 years. Are you able to walk us through some of these projects, your vision, and how do you plan to go through the market with these dozens of projects being planned?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. After the restructuring of SWPC that happened in 2016, SWPC had a critical role in Vision 2030, giving the importance of securing the kingdom's water security and occupying the ambitious role to diversify the objectives. Work have begun on developing a water national strategy after the launch of 2016. The strategy was announced in 2018, along with a clear mandate for SWPC to accelerate the delivery of critical water and wastewater projects. Since then, we have awarded 8 projects, 5 IWPs and 3 ISTPs. 7 of the 8 projects are currently under construction, where 2 would reach PCOD by the end of the year. Most recently, we have received bids for 3 ISTP projects, and we'll announce further details soon as after the evaluation is finalized. As you said, we're currently working on a very large pipeline that includes a couple of projects in IWPs, ISTPs, strategic reserves, water transmission pipelines, and small sewage treatment plants. This represents a coordination approach across the government to ensure that the country will have the right assets and capabilities at time. These procurement will follow the same mechanism that our previous project, where appropriate and proven risk mitigation are in place to ensure the bankability of these deals. Some of the projects we have started the procurement for, where they are in the EOI stage or in the qualification, and the project will follow soon, inshallah, this year and the coming 3 years.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Abdullah. Just a quick question, though. I know that at least 3 projects were in the tendering stage when COVID-19 started. Did that have any impact in terms of the length of time you need to reach financial closes? Was there any impact in terms of the construction of the 3 that were awarded before that?
The whole world has been affected by the pandemic. In SWPC, we have operational projects. We had projects that are under construction, and we had projects that are under tender. We try to work with our partners from the operational plant. We try to work with our partners to ensure that the supply will be sustainable during the hard times of the pandemic, and that to a certain point has been achieved. In the construction, we had 2 projects under construction. No delay has been witnessed on the project line, and that's thanks to our private partners and to our construction team that have supported the private sector by all what they can do to ensure that sustainability in the construction. In the tendering, as you said, we had 3 projects that were under tender. We reached for all these projects. One of them was in the peak of the pandemic, which was around May of 2020. After that, 2 projects have followed in September and in October. So this is a brief of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing It's an amazing story to tell, I would suppose, given that most of those projects managed to reach financial close despite the pandemic. I'll now invite Qaisar into the conversation. So we've seen since 2018 a sharp decline in the levelized cost of water in the region. What do you think are the factors that can ensure the downward trend in IWP tariffs will continue? I mean, of course, Jubail 3B sort of bucked the downward trend because it's slightly higher than Jubail 3A, but I'm sure there's a reason for that. But Qaisar, what's your opinion in terms of how what factors in the market would help ensure that, or is this downward trend going to continue, you think? I think that might be a more appropriate question.
Well, downward trend is a function of a number of key factors, competitive tension, and as long as authorities and tendering authorities are able to attract good competitive tension, that should continue bringing price down. The other key factor in is the cost of financing. That's something that's very, very critical. Especially one of the challenges we face is the ability to raise long-term finance. The ability to raise long-term finance to support the projects, and again, that's something that's very important. You know, ECAs have played a large role in providing long-term stable debt. And then obviously technological changes. We are seeing dramatic improvements in or reductions in cost from technological changes.
All right. So in general, are we saying what's the impact of COVID-19 in terms of the cost of financing and among others? It's a mixed bag, is it right? It's one determining factor would be the creditworthiness of the client, among others.
Sure. The immediate impact of COVID-19 was you did see in the region, particularly GCC, the oil revenues being very dramatically affected, demand for oil, which has now rebound, thank God. But nonetheless, that is something that is a factor that does affect ability to raise long-term finance, and that's something. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've just been joined by Jiries Dababneh. I'd now like to give an opportunity to Mr. Dababneh to give us a few remarks. We missed you in the first few minutes, but yeah, can you give us a few words in terms of what Jordan is currently doing in terms of water projects and how COVID-19 has affected, for instance, the demand for water in your country?
Okay, I hope sound is good first, and then good time to everybody in this session. I would say this time I'm working as Chief Advisor to His Excellency the Minister, and I've been like around 40 years of experience in water sector in Jordan. But I wanted to say that water in Jordan is very scarce, and Jordan considered like the second country in the world in terms of water scarcity. That leads us to actually go for more and more projects trying to minimize the non-revenue water or the water leakages, in a very simple word, to enable for the best use of the water in Jordan. And this is considered one of the major challenges in water in Jordan. Plus the pandemic, I mean, during the COVID-19, we had two other challenges or problems. What can I say? One of them is the high demand of drinking water due to the instruction for health and hygiene and cleaning, and so, and also for other factor that when people stayed at home for lockdown, I mean, all this raised the demand in Jordan, the time, on the same time when we have less revenue for water, that prevented us from extending or continuing our project to get more water. I mean, it's like double problem, the high demand and the less revenue that comes together during the pandemic time. But now, hopefully, we are overcoming these issues by the full capacity of work back in the water sector, and start to rethink of continuing our strategic project. One of them is what we call the National Carrier Project. This project, it's considered as a MEED project that will solve the problem of water scarcity in the capital and in other governorate in south and north. The cost of this project is like 2.5 billion USD. And
this is the Aqaba Amman water project.
Yes, okay. Yes, Aqaba Amman, but in the local term we call it the National Carrier, since it's going to send water to all governorate in Jordan. Of course, depends on the demand of each governorate. This project is going to be BOT on PPP kind of project, and it's going to be the biggest ever in Jordan for water sector, and that's all from my side.
Yeah, interesting. I heard that the IWP is expected in August, so hopefully it's going to take off as planned this time around. Thank you, Jiries. Let me now go to Abdullah. So there is this massive pipeline of projects for SWPC. Is there a hierarchy of priorities? I know that there's a schedule in terms of when these projects, whether it's the sewage treatment projects or water transmission pipeline or reservoir, but all these are a priority, I suppose. But realistically, how many projects, how many schemes can you tender and award each year? Probably it's something that will interest the investors in our audience.
First of all, the prioritizing of the project is based on the demand of an area. So our capacity planning team would study with all the stakeholders the need and the supply required for each area, and they would identify the capacities and the expected time for the PCOD for the project, and whether it's an IWP or an ISTP. For how the past 3 years, we have awarded 8 projects, and we have tendered more than 12 projects. We believe that we'll stay on that same level, and we'll tender from 4 to 5 projects each year.
Interesting. And I've also heard from some developers and investors that they want clarity in terms of the timeline, because of course they need to allocate resources. And so I think that's pretty clear with SWPC. In terms of do you agree with that, Qaisar? Beyond Saudi Arabia, is there a need for greater visibility in terms of schedule of projects coming to the market, you think?
Of course. Strategic players and financial investors will plan their deal pipeline that they will pursue, and it's always good to have as much investor-friendly information available to the market, so they can allocate their resources accordingly.
Can you repeat the question, please? Because there was a little bit noise. We could not really.
Yeah, I was asking about how do you make sewage treatment plants more attractive to investors, or as attractive to investors as IWP project?
Yeah. Actually, for the sewage, it's a little bit different in terms of investment and in terms of attracting the investors in this regard. The time you are asking the investor on like BOT, let's take an example, the BOT project. and you're asking the investor to like take the water, and you calculate the cost for this on a flexible financial model, which includes all flexible parameters like power, the quantity of water received by the contractor, and also all changes and legislation and regulation that might take place the time of BOT when it's in service. If you take these three parameters and of course with full agreement with the contractor, and you put it in one flexible financial model which take all these parameters into consideration, that will make the risk much less on the contractor side, on the investor side, and that's kind of attraction to the investors to go on for investing in such project. Of course, the main reason for having BOT in this regard, the very high cost of implementing these projects that leads normally to call for investors to come and invest and operate and later transfer for quite long time, normally between 15 to 25 years. And this will make the investor's life much easier in terms of getting the lenders also attracting to such project to invest with the guarantee of the government, the sovereign guarantee for this kind of project. This is the major point, I believe, from my experience in regard. We had a big example of project for the Middle Governorate water treatment plant. We call it the Samra BOT project, where the investors were really have big potential, to invest in this sector. If there is any extension for this question, I'm ready also to answer.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. Very interesting in terms of government support, whether in terms of primarily in terms of guarantees, and I think that's one thing that most investors and developers are looking for. Am I correct, Qaisar?
Yes, obviously we would need a creditworthy authority to guarantee some of the project risks that are not under the control of the so I would absolutely agree with that, and certainly where the off-taker has to be creditworthy, so it either is a government-backed entity or it has to be a separate entity that has sufficient creditworthiness.
Right. Thank you. In terms of, to the point of Jiries being BOT, having seen some successful projects in Jordan, even outside of the water sector, they have had successful BOT. But in the GCC, the BOO is the build, own, operate model seems to be more preferred. Jiries, can you tell us about the preference of what works better for you? Is BOO something that you do not prefer compared to BOT?
Well, in Jordan so far, the legislation, it doesn't allow us to go for BOO. Mm-hmm. It's rather, keeping the assets on the ownership of the government or the entities, the utilities. Mm-hmm. Therefore, BOO is not really yet allowed in the legislation. Mm-hmm. Actually, always government in Jordan. Let's talk little politics, although it's not maybe the right vendor for that, but it's reality. Always the people or public or parliament accuses the government for selling the assets, and I don't want really the contractors to own the assets. I would keep it with the government. I would recommend always to keep it with the government, especially in the Middle East in general. People always accuses government that you sold our assets, you put it under the private sector, but BOT, I believe, for the time being, especially after the Arab Spring times, we need to keep the transparency in dealing with contractors and with the public as well. I mean, keeping the assets is much more safe for the government in the Middle East to, easy market such ideas in the public heads. And that's what I believe. BOT always keeps the assets on the government hand at the end, and it's going to be transferred to the government at the end of the project.
Of course, I think there's a limitation in terms of the legislative framework in Jordan. Now I shall ask the same question now to Abdullah. With the PSP draft law and its implementing regulations now under public consultation, would that have any effect in terms of the models that SWPC will be recommending for the upcoming projects?
Well, you know, the new privatization law has just been approved in last March, and it will be implemented by next July. The law includes, the law includes some legality enablers that will enhance investors' confidence in the process and strengthen the enforcement of the contract, and will ensure as well to the lenders and investors that the financial obligations arising from the contracts are met. All the kind of frameworks, either BOT, are permitted in the new law as to the current drafts. It supports ongoing policies, objectives to modernize the Saudi economy, by targeting new sectors. I believe it's around 16 sectors for privatization, with a goal to increase the private sector contribution to the GDP. In addition to the infrastructure, utilities, and schooling PPPs, today we're seeing other sectors beginning their privatization program, such as the healthcare and transport. The new law need to be understood in the context of other significant steps taken in the recent years, supporting the opening up of the Saudi for global investment and accelerating the modernization and diversification of the Saudi economy. The other, enhancements include the bankruptcy law, the movable assets security law, the changes in the commercial pledge laws, and the relaxation of the for ownership limits. And lastly, the privatization law, which is a very significant step towards ensuring that that Saudi is seen an attractive place for long-term investments by international and local investors.
Of course. Yeah. Well, thank you. If I can ask, Jiries, I know there is a huge pipeline of projects, building pipeline of projects across Middle East and North Africa region. How can you compete for financing and for allocate resources given this massive build up in other economies in the region? And you mentioned at some point that the cost of electricity, let's say, and land are one of the key factors determining how cheaply or how expensively you can build these assets. And can you?
Yes, sure. Actually, these challenges can be overcome by adopting the PPP principle. I mean, the problem with funding is always in Jordan for such big projects, and the only option for PPP, of course, depends on the project, depends on the model needed. I mean, there is many levels or models for PPP, as you all know, starting from service contract, management contract, BOO, BOT, and up to divestiture, where you lose all the assets to the private sector. Therefore, if you choose the right model for your project during the designing and implementation, and also to cover the gap of the existing gap, wherever it is, whether in design, then you need to go for DPO, for example. Problem with funding, you go for BOT. Problem with management, you go for management contract. Problem with services quality, you go for service. I mean, there is many levels of PPP or many models of PPP where you have to choose the right model when you address the project to the market. And of course, a lot of consultants around the world is really expert in this. And we have learned a lot from them the time we started the privatization issues, even before having the right law to cover these issues. I mean, in 1999, we started the first privatization model in Jordan, and it was in water, in Amman water utility, where we called for companies, I mean, via an open tender for management contract. And we have a French company where they led the management in the Amman utility for around 4 years, and also we extend for another 3 years. I mean, in a very simple words, you need to choose the right model for the project to overcome and to cover the gaps, the existing gaps of that project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Jiries. Yeah, I think that has to do with a flexible legal framework, and I think Qaisar might be able to comment in terms of you did mention that there's a need for flexibility in terms of the legislative frameworks. We were saying most GCC countries now having adopted a PPP law, and also of course there have been successful water projects before those laws were enacted. But what exactly are you looking for when you say there should be a flexible legal framework, Qaisar?
Sure. Let's start. Why do we have privatization? Why do we have PPP? And both my panelists have mentioned very good reasons. I have a much more simpler definition of why we have privatization, and then we come as why do we have people like us as financial investors. You have privatization for 2 or 3 big reasons. You want capex efficiency. Generally, a private sector builder, owner, operator, generally on the right, if it's done in the right competitive format, can bring significant capex efficiencies, meaning build the same plant for a lower cost. Then, a private sector owner, operator, generally brings OPEX efficiencies. Okay, so it can run that plant and deliver the product or the utility services at a lower cost. Okay, so these are 2: capex efficiency, OPEX efficiency. The third big reason why you want to do privatization is to relieve the government from funding these big projects. You want to bring private sector participation. You want to bring overseas capital into the projects. So these are the 3 big headline objectives that you want. Many countries in the GCC, when they first did the IPPs, their reason was capex efficiency. I don't want to name the countries, but they had discovered that all the power plants that they built and what it was being built, similar plants around the world, they were discovering their plants were being built at a much higher cost. And they said, this has to be something wrong here. So they said, okay, we want to bring capex efficiency. Then you had other GCC countries who went into this because they discovered that the financial burden of building these projects was too high, and they wanted to attract price. So and then you when you want to do all this, you have to then look at how do you attract capital and how do you attract strategic investors and financial investors. Strategic investors and financial investors, their reason for pursuing these projects is to make a profit. They don't come in to meet social or political objectives of the government. They come in to make an economic return, and an economic return that is legal, justified, and fair. Okay, and so whenever you have a project that is being tendered, they will look at the economic returns, they will look at the project risks, they will look at the political risk, they look at the financing risk, and they will put all those risks, and they say, what is a fair return for that risk? And they will say, you know, do I invest in a project A in a country X, or do I look at a project B in a country Y, you know, and so forth. And they will then decide where they have the advantages to invest money and to get the returns that they feel are appropriate for the risk they're taking. And they are also investing to make a return. They're not a government organization to do social work in the countries they go into. Obviously, they will not they will not break laws, and they will adhere to high level of ethics and standards, but it's an economic incentive. So what we as a financial investor do is we look at, you know, what are the parameters in the project that will attract our capital and our investors' capital to meet the economic returns that we have promised to our investors. And what we also do is, when we do invest, we want to be able to exit our investment over some time horizon. We can't be there locked. So these are the kind of things we look at. It's a long answer, but I just thought I'll help give you how we face things.
Thank you, Qaisar. I'd now like to ask Abdullah a quick question. This is not related to PPP, but like me, I think there are some in our audiences who wanted to understand the split of responsibilities between you, SWPC, SWCC, and the newly formed WTT WITCO. Is that something you can explain to us a little bit?
Yes, I'll start with the SWCC. They're a government entity that is responsible for producing water and transferring it to NWC, which is the National Water Company, and also they have some IWPPs project. Their main responsibility is from a government entity as an EPC. They build and operate these kind of projects, and they're also recently tendering some of their brownfield projects such as Ras Al Khair. And SWPC, we are a principal off-taker from the private sector. So we deal with water production, sewage treatment, and we have some power plants, which has been tendered 10 or 15 years ago, and we are the off-taker from these kind of projects. WITCO is a new entity that has been established by MEWA, and it will manage and own the transmission pipelines that was previously the responsibility of SWCC.
Right, and all the three entities are part of MEWA. MEWA would be the ministry that oversees these three entities. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So the umbrella is under MEWA. There are several stakeholders, which is SWPC, NWC, WITCO, and also to collaborate the privatization. We have NCP with us in finalizing the privatization of any project.
Right. Cool. So I've mentioned earlier that the price per cubic meter of water has dropped dramatically from 2018, and might continue to do so depending on how the market responds to the COVID-19 pandemic and the creditworthiness of clients, among others. But some countries like Oman, they have a shorter concession period of about 15 years, whereas Saudi Arabia would have 25 years and Dubai would have 35 years. Obviously, there's an impact of this concession tenure in terms of the prices that they can obtain. Is there Jiries is there, or Qaisar is an ideal period in terms of these long-term projects? How long can you? What is the safest amount of time where you can keep your investment with one asset?
Actually depends on the adopted model. If we're talking about service contracts started from 1 year to 4 years, if we're talking about, this is the recommended by consultant around the world. If we're talking about management contract, the recommended period is like between 4 to 7 years, and then the entity has to take, the services back from the management contractor. Normally, BOT project, since it includes a huge investment in assets, as a capital investment, and for the contractors or the developer to be attracted, normally we do it like 25 years, between 15 to 25, but recommended always the 25. That reduces the cost of the operation in terms of the cubic meter, whether it's water or sewage, treatment. The cost of treating the cubic meter for sewage and having the water and desalinated or wherever treated to be a drinking water. 25 years is very much recommended for BOT, and this is proven around the world, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Jiries, in terms of the use of effluent in Jordan, do you see, is there a mandate to increase the usage and adoption of TSE, treated sewage effluent, because that would be a driver for more sewage treatment plants to be built?
Okay, for the sewage treatment, there is a very much, strict law, for using the effluent, what we call the effluent, which is the water coming from the sewage treatment plant, what we call the influent. Normally, it goes for irrigation and depends on the station and the standard. There is a level of standard in terms of quality of that water, but the legal one is that can be used for any kind of agriculture, for the cooked food. Anything, you take it as vegetable and you cook it, and also for trees and for the using the plants for animals in general, as farms for animals, feeding the animals. The sewage treatment plant has a very strict law in Jordan, and we every hour we have sampling the effluent of all stations in Jordan, whether it's belong to the contractor like BOT project or operated by the government. Every single hour we have a sampling. We have a sample of these effluent to make sure the standard is respected.
All right, thank you, Jiries. In terms of we're going to another topic in terms of hydrogen. There is an increase. Most countries in the region, Saudi Arabia included, want to be a hub for green hydrogen, and there would be that would require that would help push demand for desalinated water. Is that correct? Do you see that as maybe in your next planning statement, SWPC might take that into account? Abdullah?
Yes, it might be taken in account, and with the review of all our stakeholders, and when to introduce such change to our projects and to our framework. We usually change our requirements, change our we test the market and we change how they react to it, and in line with all our strategic views.
Right. Well, thank you. I'm not sure if you can comment, either of you can comment. So Mohammed bin Salman recently came up with a Middle East green initiative about that would include planting billions of trees as part of the energy efficient, as part of the decarbonization initiative. in Saudi Arabia, as well as the broader Middle East and North Africa region. And again, this will be a major driver, you think, mainly for TSE?
It would be, and the initiative has been launched, 3 months ago, and we were trying to use our sewage treatment plants as more efficient by using the treated water to satisfy to fulfill some of the to fulfill and be in line with that initiative.
Okay, well, thank you. I've got another question here before I let you go. There's another question in terms of Abdullah, are you able to show, are there any indicators in terms of the pipeline with potential timeframes and sizes? I know that you already mentioned that there are at least 3 IWPs that are in the early procurement stage, EOI. You have Ras Muhaysen and I think Rabig, but they want, our audience seems to want to get an indicator in terms of which projects will be coming to the pipeline sooner than later.
Yeah, are you talking about the pipeline transmission projects, or are you talking about our pipeline in general?
Pipeline in general, I would suppose.
Yeah, and currently we have 2 IWPs that is the market, as you mentioned, Rabigh 4 IWP with a capacity of 600,000 meter cubic per day, and Ras Muhaysen, which is 300,000, and 2 to 3 more projects will come in the next, I would say, 12 to 16 to 18 months IWPs. Also, we have several ISTPs that will be launched to the market soon. We have the small SSTP project that the EOI it has been introduced to the market, which is the Jazan cluster. It's around 20 small sewage plants with their connection network. We have the transmission pipelines. We have one of the projects has been introduced to the market, which is Ras Muhaysen Makkan al-Baha transmission pipeline, and two other projects will follow next year, inshallah. Also, we have the strategic reserves, which is one of our newest project that will be launched in the market by the end of this year.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, amazing. Is there a timeline for awarding batch 2 of the independent sewage treatment plants? I know that you've been evaluating bids for these 3 projects. Is there a timeline on when you might award those contracts, Abdullah?
Well, the bids are currently under evaluation, and we'll announce it. I could not give you a hard date, but it will be announced in the couple of 2 months or 3.
Okay, right. We've got another question. Thanks, Abdullah. We've got another question. Maybe Jiries, you can take this on. We've got someone in the audience who's asking whether there is a gateway or is there an opportunity for services provider. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if they do desalination or sewage from Africa to invest, let's say, in your country, given they have an abundant manpower, good level of skills and technology. Is everyone welcome? I think that's the question, Jiries.
Well, in general, BOT, it's an open tender. We announce it in an open tender as internationally, and everybody is welcome to bid for our project, of course, unless in certain project, if it is funded from certain financier and they have their own conditions, I mean, for nationalities, that might be some kind of restriction. But in general, in other projects, it's an open tender. For the strategic project, it's an open tender. Of course, there is some legal points where they have to cooperate with local contractors with a certain percentage, not less than 33%, which is 1/3. And generally, everybody are welcome, and with respecting the Jordan law in this regard. Yes, everybody's welcome. Okay.
Thank you. Right. Abdullah, thank you, Jiries. Abdullah, so I think that's a relevant question for you as well, because I know that dozens of companies do express their interest in projects, and then you then bring them, pre-qualify those companies. So is everybody welcome? Subject again, of course, to the constraints where there might be in terms of the legal provisions.
Everybody is welcome. There is no liability to show your interest in any project, and after that you showed your interest, you will the process will follow by the qualifications. If you're qualified, you will move to the next step. So every investor, developer are welcome to join in our projects.
Right, thank you. Just a bit of a question before I give each of you half a minute for your closing remarks. Abdullah, there's a localization requirement for most of the projects. Again, that's part of the National Transformation Program, of course. Do you find that international investors are able to meet those localization requirements?
Yes, the local requirement is a very important matter in our project. And our 8 previous projects, the investors locally and international have proven that they can commit to these kind of requirements, and we have not faced a lot issues on that. The thresholds are high and could be achieved by all of the projects.
Interesting. Thank you. Now, I'll give Qaisar half a minute if you have anything to say in terms of the current environment for investing in water and wastewater projects. Qaisar?
Yeah, I think the current environment is very exciting for us. I think privatization has moved up the agenda for every GCC country and countries around the world. It's an exciting time for people like us as a financial investor to be pursuing projects, because capital is being welcomed, and capital from all sources, not just strategic players. So we look forward to working on projects in the MENA region, in Oman, and then certainly helping to provide value to the local economies and to our investors. Thank you.
Right. Jiries, before you give your closing remarks, there's a quick question, Jiries. When is the RFP expected for the national project? Is it August?
Well, yes, it seems the one who asked, he knows the schedule. It's roughly in August, yes. But he had to be pre-qualified, because we did the pre-qualification process, and certain contractors certain developers has been qualified. We received 13 offers, and now we are under evaluation process for pre-qualification. If he submit his offer in this regard and he's qualified, then he will be able to submit his bid for the RFP. I don't know who's asking, to be honest.
Sure. Of course, yeah, and we can respond to this guy a bit later on. Said they have not received answer for pre-qualification. Is that because the pre-qualification is ongoing? You have not yet finalized.
It is under evaluation. It's not issued yet. I mean, the results of the pre-qualification.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll let Abdullah. I'll give you the last half a minute for any words you might have to our audience who are probably investors, partners, consultants.
Thank you, Jennifer. As mentioned, that all we have a large pipeline for the upcoming 3 to 5 years. We usually update our 7-year statements where investors and developers interested could schedule our projects with and allocate some investments or a team to work on. It starts with an EOI where there is no liability on on submitting such an interest, and the process of the tendering will begin after that. Everybody is welcome to invest in our project.
Right. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a delightful full hour of panel discussion. I hope to in our next PPP event, and all the best to your projects. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you so much, Jiries, and Qaisar. See you again in other events.
Thank you.